So because so few of you were interested in seeing any Star Wars videos on my channel, instead, we're going to jump back into Darkseid War and cover some of the one-shots following the conclusion of Act 1, starting with Batman. However, if you are interested in seeing some Star Wars content, you can head over to Rob Explains and view it there. So the Batman one-shot from Darkseid War was written by Peter Tomasi and provides us with a view of Gotham City following Batman's acquisition of the Mobius chair and his ability to know all things that villains have done and are doing. Now, what makes this comic particularly interesting to me is that it takes the dichotomy between Batman and the law and throws it into sharp relief. What I mean here is that when Bruce Wayne meets Jim Gordon after he's activated the bat signal, he makes the case that Gordon doesn't need to do this anymore due to the fact that Bruce knows everything that's happening in Gotham at the moment. To sidetrack for a second, for those of you who have been reading Jim Gordon Batman, much like Darkseid War proper, the continuity of this story in relation to Batman's solo series is unknown, and at this point, we can only really guess as to when it takes place. However, the fact remains that the reason for Jim Gordon's fear of Bruce Wayne is due to the fact that where he previously went with the evidence at hand, examined it, and came to a clear and rational conclusion which could stand in the court of law, with the Mobius chair, while it does grant him absolute knowledge on what every criminal is doing at the time, this knowledge can't be verified or peer-reviewed. Instead, it has to be taken on faith, and because courts can't trust this, all the criminals that Batman has brought in have had to be released due to a lack of evidence. Something I also hope you notice here is that Bruce is a much colder person than he used to be. Where previously he seemed detached from his emotions, operating with cold logic, with the Mobius chair at his disposal, he doesn't really even seem human. Whether this is a byproduct of the fact that he's always been this way and the chair simply brings it out, or because this is a new aspect of his personality is really up for us to debate. But the foundation on which Bruce Wayne operates is that he has the ability to look beyond the physical actions of individuals and analyze people as a whole. To this end, he's now under the opinion that humanity's base instincts are for violence, and that for better or worse, Jim Gordon and Gotham have no choice but to follow his lead and place those he deems as criminals in jail. And so with their conversation coming to an end and Bruce Wayne departing, we pick up with him traveling to intercept several criminals in the midst of planning a robbery. Now, something I'd like to focus on here for a second is the nature of the criminal element. If I had to throw my own opinion into the hat, I think Batman's actually throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The reason why I say this is because despite their actions, one of the fundamental principles that separates democracy from tyranny is the concept of innocent until proven guilty. What Batman has done here is institute his own philosophy of justice, and again, while he had previously done this before regarding how he gained information, in the end, his target was always apprehended within the confines of the law itself. Furthermore, rather than allowing criminals to carry out their own robbery and then provide the evidence necessary to stop them, instead, he actually transports them to Antarctica and leaves them there. Now, the reason why I say this is important is because for Batman, working within the law is actually easier now than it's ever been. With the Mobius chair providing knowledge of all things, both past and present, it would be extremely easy for him to attain the evidence necessary or even point the police in the direction of the evidence they need to secure a case. But instead, he's taken the most extreme road, stripping individuals of their right to a fair trial, deeming them guilty due to their plan to commit an act they haven't actually committed yet, and then holding them accountable for it. And so transitioning to the home of an unidentified man, what the story also does is give us a chance to ask the question, is what Bruce is doing right? When he arrives at the man's home and finds him brandishing a knife, we learn that this is actually the man's ex-wife's apartment. In addition to being drunk, his decisions are governed by rage in that he had been beating his wife, and when she finally became fed up and decided to leave, he made the choice to plan her murder by hiding in the closet with a knife. And so taking the man and transporting him to Themyscira, where Batman's initially greeted with anger by the Amazons who don't like uninvited outsiders, he presents the man to them, making the case that he beats his women, and that spending some time on the island will provide him with an opportunity to better understand how to adequately treat women. And so the reason behind Bruce Wayne's harsh methods in dealing with criminals comes to fruition when we follow him back to the time of the death of his parents, as they were killed by Joe Chill. Now, this moment is of stupendous importance, and the reason why is because it creates a single definitive idea for Batman. Despite the fact that he can capture and arrest criminals prior to their crimes as much as he wants, the one thing that he can't change is the death of his parents. Now, the cool thing about this is that this is a very human moment for Bruce. Rather than being the violent sociopath who stripped people of their rights for the sake of the greater good, in truth, if I can be a little dramatic, Bruce Wayne is really just a kid wishing his parents would come back. And so using his chair to jump back to the present, he looks to take his vengeance out on Joe Chill, the man who had murdered his mother and father. Picking up in Gotham State Penitentiary, Bruce encounters Chill for the first time since he was 18 years old. Now, the important thing to keep in mind here is that, to be honest, Bruce is probably not acting sane. I say this because the behavior he's demonstrated so far indicates that despite his methods, he's still a man of reason and conscience. But for this encounter, he seems to be throwing it all out the window, and his anger appears to be coming to a slow boil, working its way up to a fever pitch. Initially, Batman taunts Chill in saying that he was curious how Joe spent his days in jail with a pungent toilet and no window until he dies. But when Joe calls for help, Batman places a shield around the prison cell that keeps all noise from entering or leaving. Following this, Batman taunts Joe a bit, asking him what it is that he feels he deserves regarding creature comforts and a life of luxury. Now, this is actually a throwback of sorts to Batman The Dark Knight issue number 0 by Greg Hurwitz, which did a bit of retelling of Batman's origins. In this story, when Bruce Wayne was 18 years old, he had traveled to confront Joe Chill regarding the murder of his parents. During their confrontation, it was revealed that Chill was an alcoholic, but had made the statement that he deserved a few creature comforts. As a result, and while looking for his next fix, he saw Martha Wayne's pearls, robbed them, and in panic, shot both Martha and Thomas Wayne. However, what this story does is seems to retcon The Dark Knight number 0 in that Bruce has Joe confide in him the number of people that he's killed over the course of his adult life, and when Joe Chill reveals that it's around 40 people, Bruce transports him to Crime Alley. Stating that his only real interest is in the 2 individuals who died in this location, Bruce takes his mask off, revealing his identity to Joe Chill. Now, Bruce revealing his identity to Joe is simply an instance of intimidation, and that he threatens to spread the word throughout the prison that Joe's actions of killing the Waynes are the reason for why most of the men are in prison in the first place. As a result, if this were to happen, it would be a virtual death sentence for Joe, in that where the prisoners are not in a position to kill Batman, they are in a position to kill Joe. And so after having his fun and tormenting him with the possibility of his own death, Bruce uses the power of the Mobius chair to force Joe to forget everything that he's seen and heard. Now, to offer my own opinion, I would say that this would allow Bruce to return to Joe, torment him in this fashion, and experience his reaction of horror each time that it happened. While this may seem a little extreme, to be honest, I don't actually blame Bruce for this, and that he has an opportunity to torment the murderer of his parents for every single day of his life. And so picking back up in the Batcave, we learn that there's actually a little more to Bruce's acquisition of the Mobius chair than we were initially led to believe. Where he's greeted by Alfred with a warm dinner, Bruce shows that he's actually suffering from extreme anguish. The reason behind this is revealed to be due to the fact that the chair has a mind of its own to a degree, and that it's actually been acting against Bruce. Now, while we're not told exactly what this means, I would go as far as to say that this is due to the fact that Geoff Johns intends to flesh this out during the main Darkseid War story. But regarding the events as they unfold here, the case that Bruce makes is that the chair functions as an observer and a chronicler, as opposed to the on-hands approach that Bruce has been taking. As a result, not only is it impacting him physically, but it also seems to make it impossible for him to leave. Now, as the story comes to an end, where we would expect something on the order of Bruce attempting to move past this problem, or at the very least, put his mind to task in attempting to understand why this is, instead, he embraces the change, stating that if the chair allows him to function without any sustenance or sleep, then it's a small price to pay, and that ultimately, it will allow him to focus on and eventually take down the Joker. With that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end, and let me know down in the comments section if you guys are interested in seeing any more of the Darkseid War one-shots. And I will catch you guys later. Peace.